All right, so I want to go ahead and talk about Wes Watson. A lot of people are talking about that Wes Watson is going off on UFC fighters and that apparently he instantly regretted it. You already know these kind of headlines, like too lazy to try. Wes Watson goes off on UFC fighters, instantly regrets it. So I want to go ahead and check to see for myself what's going on with Wes Watson. We haven't talked about Wes Watson in a long time, but I'm very curious to see what he's going to say. So let's see if he really is going off on UFC fighters.
You guys live in a fantasy world where pro fighters aren't the biggest squares on the planet. UFC fighting is gay. Like all that shit, like MMA fighting and all that shit is for people who never really were in fights. Like they never whooped ass their whole life. So they're always like, I'm gonna train and fight. Like I've always just handled shit very easily. I never had to think about fighting because I always just extinguished the problem however I had to. So the point is like, that's for people who like never could really fight. They had to go learn to fight. I mean, people who just handle business, they don't have to learn to fight. There's a difference between you guys live in a...
Okay. I understand what he's trying to say. He's trying to say that, like, you know, when it comes to, at least this is what I'm getting. In the context of street fighting, there is no rules. There is none of that. You got to handle it. And, you know, if you can, you will cheat regardless of the rules, because at the end of the day, it's not about who comes out fighting. It's the one who survives. I guess that's kind of like what he's trying to say here. However, I'm a little confused as to how he instantly regretted. Which we're gonna go ahead and check to see what's up with Too Lazy to Try, because usually he goes out to get all of this information. So let's go ahead and check to see what's going on.
Fighter did his jujitsu on him, then the guy's gonna come back and duct tape his family. Pro fighters are the epitome of squares.
Yeah, see, that's kind of what I was already alluding to. The fact that, like, in the streets, like, you know, if you mess with the wrong person, they're gonna come for your family. You know, they're like, it's not about like being a pro fighter, because at the end of the day, a pro fighter versus a gun isn't exactly going to, you're not gonna walk out a winner from that. You know, so I understand what he's trying to say.
You know, he decided to call out the best fighters in the world for being cowards because they aren't violent enough for him. Like, Wes keeps calling MMA fighters squares, and it sounds like he only respects people that are violent who are willing to kill people. I think that's what he's trying to say here, but you could tell he's just trying to think of any way he can to criticize UFC fighters. And I guess he thinks the best way to do that is to talk about how unhinged his friends are because they're willing to kill people and go to jail for it. And he also says that MMA fighters and boxers aren't real fighters because they train to fight. I don't know how that makes any sense. And he also criticizes them for only fighting in the ring, even though a lot of them get in street fights as well. And I'm sure they'd be open to a street fight with Wes if he wants. But we all know Wes is the real coward here. You know, he had his chance to prove how tough he is. Like, he's begging his haters to come meet him at the gym to fight him.
Yeah, so when it comes to Wes Watson, I think that, like, his whole idea is that, you know, when it comes to, like, the streets is always going to win because the streets don't play by the rules. I think that's, like, the whole idea. But I do also understand that, like, it doesn't matter how good or how well you know how to fight. If a person pulls out a weapon, and that specifically a gun, yeah, you're not exactly going to come out with a championship title in that match, you know. So I understand what he's trying to say. So, okay, go on.
You know, apparently he respects that more than people stepping in the octagon to fight. So once again, Wes is proving he's an unhinged idiot that has no self-control. And the fact
I wouldn't say that. I would just say that, you know what it is with Wes Watson is that he doesn't know how to communicate his ideas. To me, it just seems that it's not so much that he's an idiot. I think that guy, when it comes to business, at least it seems like he's doing something right. The whole idea of how he communicates ideas, however, that's a different story. I don't think that he knows how to communicate his ideas formally and effectively, because when you're speaking to an audience, you have to speak to them in a formal tense. You can't speak to them in this street way of speaking to them, because when you have it unbelievably simplified the way Wes Watson likes to communicate his ideas, oftentimes a lot of what he's attempting to communicate gets lost in translation. It really does, because he's not using the correct verbiage. And so a lot of people they listen to these words and say, well, he thinks that that UFC fighters are pussies, they you know, they're cowards and stuff like that. Like, what do you mean by that? So his speaking style is very, I would consider it very, probably like middle school, lower high school level. I don't know. So I wouldn't say that he's an idiot. If you want to consider that an idiot, that's fine, I guess. But to me, I think it's important to understand and meet the person at their level of communication, you know?
He's trying to make this behavior sound cool while he's on trial for assault is wild.
Don't encourage anyone to run up to these pro fighters. Pro fighters are pussies, okay? They're only good in the ring. People I know will not accept a loss. You don't want to fuck with the wrong people. And the wrong people out here in the world are not pro fighters. Pro fighters are the epitome of squares. They're like, come in the ring and I'll fight you. The people I grew up with and went to prison with, they don't give a fuck about a ring. They don't give a fuck if they're on camera. They don't give a fuck if they have to fucking live the rest of their life in prison.
Yeah, so again, Wes is living by this calibrated scale of the most dangerous people he knows compared to like UFC fighters who are not willing to commit a crime. Because I mean, if you really think about it, like perhaps they can or not. Will a UFC fighter, if he aims a gun at a person, will he be able to pull the trigger? Compared to a criminal who has pulled the trigger multiple times and potentially has, you know, a record of, you know, eliminating people, who's gonna end up walking out of that, you know? Some people hesitate to shoot somebody else, believe it or not, because some people think that it's as easy as just pulling the trigger, which it is easy to pull the trigger, but it's very difficult to wrestle with the idea of eliminating somebody and ending their lives, you know? So yeah, I know, I understand what he's trying to say.
You will not beat them. They will not take a loss. You guys live in a fantasy world where pro fighters aren't the biggest squares on the planet.
Okay, let's just go ahead and get this cleared up. UFC fighters are not squares, okay? First off, they are willing to fight anybody. And we have seen this with, I forgot the name of that guy. But there's this prankster who was attempting, pranks fighter regrets it. I forgot the name of this guy. I think it's this one. Look.
Filming it. I'm filming a YouTube video.
Are you okay?
This guy ended up messing around with this guy. I wish I could show you guys, but the entire time he's getting in his face, telling him like to give me the equipment, to do this, to do that. Those are my weights. And this is I think, I don't know what the name of this fighter is. I forgot his name. He gets in his face a couple times, of course, but then he gives up the machine multiple times, the weights multiple times, until finally he challenges him to a fight inside the octagon. And then he ends up going off he ends up fighting this guy. Ah, man, what's his name? I don't know his name.
Just that one over there. That one.
Bro, you being mad disrespectful, bro.
That one, bro. Just, hey, walk him through. That one.
Bro, you being mad disrespectful.
My boy, I use this one. I want you to guys move it and we're not gonna have an issue, my boy. Bro, I'm not gonna move until you move, my boy. I want you to move, my boy.
I'll be done in like 30 minutes, bro.
I don't got no 30 minutes. Homie, you can finish your 30 minutes on the other treadmill.
Look at that. He ends up giving him the treadmill. To me, because this guy is a really skilled fighter. What is his name? Oh, Raul Rosas. Yes, of course. This guy. Raul Rosas, this guy, he's an incredibly skilled fighter, and this guy is just going up to him and messing around with a dangerous weapon.
They're getting mad, fool. They keep saying like if it's a joke or not.
Right, now first off.
Yeah. And this guy ends up, let me see, I know he ends up showing him off, right? Towards the end. Right here.
Are you running that? Why are you scared? Why are you scared, dog? Huh? Why are you scared?
What's up, homie?
What's up, homie? Come on. Come on, bro. Why are you running?
Okay, and I want you to understand that this is after multiple harassment events, okay? So he harassed Rosas so many times, okay? He didn't just call him out once. This was after multiple times of being harassed by this prankster. So to me, at least, he gave up the machine. Incredibly humbled. You can call that a pushover. I don't care, bro. To me, that's incredibly humble because you're a weapon, bro. You don't want to eliminate this guy. But he, after some time, he said, let's take this to the ring. And then, of course, you guys can go and check that out for yourselves because, unfortunately, it does get a little bit graphic because they end up, Raul ends up choking this prankster out. And, You know, even as he's tapping out, Raul is not letting him go. So if you guys want to go ahead and check that out, I know for a fact I'll find that video, so I'll go ahead and put it down below in the description so you guys can go watch it.
Like one of his orbiters, this guy Clinton Dye, he tried explaining Wes's comments more about the UFC. You know, he had to back Wes up because people were being too mean to him on the internet. So he tried to defend him, and he sounded just as deranged as Wes. Like, this did not help.
Some of you may have fundamentally missed the point of the UFC comment. Here's the deal. Right now, in your society, there are people walking around you every single day that have killed before or looking for an excuse to kill again. But you think you're going to meet them at the coffee shop. You're going to square up, you're going to throw a couple combos, maybe get lucky, knock them out, or put them in a rear naked choke like you were taught in the jiu-jitsu box. Everything's going to be okay. But in reality, that psychopath is going to pull out a piece, plug 2 into your chest, and then they're going to sit down and finish the coffee that you were drinking.
First off, bro, that is not what people are upset about, okay? People are upset at the fact that he's disrespecting UFC fighters with his language. That's what people are upset about. They understand the idea that, yeah, he's gonna, you know, that there's criminals out there that don't care if you're a professional fighter and they can end your life. No, we got that message. It's just that the way he's communicating it is being truly, I understand that he's using a calibrated scale to draw a comparison so then you can see these violent offenders in a new light, or much far beyond that from a UFC fighter, and just how dangerous these guys are. But that's what people are upset about, the fact that like they're minimizing these UFC fighters and they're not giving them the respect that they deserve. That's what people are upset about, not the idea that Wes Watson is communicating.
They're gonna be more mad that they got blood on their fucking chucks than they took your life without hesitation. That man's gonna step over your carcass just like that and continue the day like nothing even happened.
So I guess their point is there are people out in society that are psychopaths that will kill you. Like, nobody is aware of that. But of course, only Wes and his goons would act like some unhinged lunatics are more badass than UFC fighters. But let me know what you guys think about it down in the comments. And if you want extra content from me, I recently talked about Wes having this meltdown and going on a racist rant during that same live stream. I talked about that over on...
Yeah, that's the thing, man. When it comes to communicating your ideas, it's, you know, it's exceptionally important that you communicate them effectively, because if you don't, you're going to end up in a position where Wes Watson is currently, where he's, you know, diminishing the value, not the value, but like the perception of these UFC fighters by drawing a comparison with the most violent offenders that he potentially knows, you know. So I think that that's in bad taste. Obviously, two different lifestyles. In terms of technicality and skill, UFC fighters are always going to win, okay? But if you're just going to talk about like how violent these guys are and they're just going to pull out a gun out, eliminate these guys, then that's not exactly a skill, but rather a conditioning that this person went through. Because if they can pull out a weapon and eliminate that person, then that means that whatever environment they grew in conditioned them to be like that. I don't think that those lifestyles are close. Those are two different lifestyles, and I think that it's a unfair comparison to compare a UFC fighter with a violent offender. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on Wes Watson. I think Wes Watson has to really work on the way he communicates his ideas.